In the early 2010s, ISIS emerged as a dominant extremist group, rapidly expanding across Iraq and Syria by exploiting political instability and conflict. ISIS originated from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or AQI, which capitalized on the instability following the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. The Syrian civil war, beginning in 2011, further enabled ISIS to seize territories across Iraq and Syria, declaring a caliphate under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2014 and controlling vast territories including Mosul and Raqqa, attracting foreign fighters worldwide. Infamous for its extreme violence, ISIS conducted mass executions, enslaved minority populations, destroyed cultural heritage, and inspired or directed global terrorist attacks. Its sophisticated propaganda machinery amplified its reach across the globe. In response, the United States and allied nations formed the Global Coalition to defeat ISIS in 2014, initiating Operation Inherent Resolve to conduct targeted military operations aimed at dismantling ISIS's capabilities and restoring stability in the affected regions. The Royal Australian Air Force played a crucial role in Operation Okra from 2014 to 2017, which was Australia's contribution to the international coalition against ISIS. The operation began in September 2014 when Australia deployed an Air Task Group, ATG, to support the coalition. During the operation, the RAAF employed FA-18 Hornets, FA-18F Super Hornets, E-7A Wedgetail Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft, KC-30A Air-to-Air Refueling Tankers, C-130J Hercules, and C-17 Globemasters. Many of these assets were primarily stationed at bases in the United Arab Emirates and operated across Iraq and Syria. The ATG conducted airstrikes, supported ground forces, and engaged in dynamic targeting missions. The Hornets and Super Hornets were responsible for most of the airstrikes, flying over 2,700 sorties and dropping precision-guided munitions on ISIS targets, including command and control centers, vehicles, and other key assets. The E-7A Wedgetail played a vital role in coordinating coalition air assets in the congested airspace of the region, managing dozens of aircraft simultaneously, flying around 300 missions. Meanwhile, the KC-30A ensured that both Australian and coalition aircraft remained fueled and operational throughout their missions, flying 1,440 missions and delivering 47,000 tons of fuel to coalition aircraft. Humanitarian missions were also a significant component of the RAAF's involvement. In August 2014, prior to the commencement of airstrikes, RAAF C-130J Hercules and C-17 Globemaster aircraft dropped supplies to Yazidi civilians trapped by ISIS on Mount Sinjar, Iraq, as part of an international effort to relieve the besieged population. The ATG also supported Iraqi and Kurdish forces, particularly during the liberation of key cities like Ramadi. Operations expanded into Syria in September 2015, with the RAAF conducting its first airstrikes there later that month. The strikes targeted ISIS positions and infrastructure, disrupting their recruitment and financial operations. By the end of 2017, the RAAF had flown thousands of sorties, successfully contributing to the degradation of ISIS operational capabilities. The ATG's operations were praised for their precision and professionalism, underscoring Australia's role in the broader international effort against terrorism in the Middle East. In this video, we will look at the specific missions undertaken by the RAAF and speak to some of the personnel involved in the operation. Shortly after beginning operations in Iraq, Australian FA-18s were involved in dynamic engagement missions, flexible, rapid response air operations where aircraft are tasked to engage targets of opportunity in real time, often in response to changing battlefield conditions. These missions can include close air support, air interdiction, and target of opportunity engagements. During October 2014, RAAF FA-18F Super Hornets from No. 1 Squadron were tasked with such dynamic targeting missions over northern and western Iraq, where ISIS was attempting to consolidate its control. These missions were launched from Al Minhad Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, which was a strategic hub for Australian operations in the Middle East. The dynamic nature of these missions meant that RAAF pilots were often given targets in real time by forward air controllers on the ground, or by the Combined Air Operations Centre overseeing coalition airstrikes. The RAAF Super Hornets relied on GBU 31 or 38 Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs, which are GPS-guided bombs capable of striking targets with high accuracy. These munitions were critical in minimizing collateral damage, especially in urban areas. They also used paveway laser-guided bombs for targeting vehicles and enemy positions in dense urban areas. The Fa-18F Super Hornets also carried 20mm M61 Vulcan cannons, which were used in close air support roles, such as targeting ISIS infantry or light vehicles at close range. Supporting the Super Hornets were the KC-30A multi-role tanker and the E-7A Wedgetail airborne early warning and control aircraft. Key targets during this early phase of the operation were ISIS troop concentrations, convoys, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices or suicide car bombs, heavy weapons such as artillery, mortars and armoured vehicles. In early October 2014, RAAF Super Hornets were deployed to target ISIS forces threatening Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city. ISIS had captured the city in June 2014, and the group was reinforcing its defences in anticipation of an eventual counter-offensive. The Australian Super Hornets attacked fortified positions, weapons caches, and supply convoys, which helped degrade ISIS's capacity to defend Mosul. In northern Iraq, the RAAF were providing close air support to Kurdish Peshmerga forces who were defending northern Iraq from ISIS incursions. The Peshmerga were heavily engaged in battles to protect towns near the Kurdish Autonomous Region, including Erbil and Kirkuk. RAAF aircraft would strike ISIS artillery and fighting positions, which allowed the Peshmerga to advance and reclaim territory. In one instance, they helped Peshmerga forces recapture a town near the strategic Mosul Dam, which had fallen to ISIS earlier in 2014. ISIS had held Fallujah since early 2014, making it one of its most important strongholds in western Iraq. In mid-October that year, RAAF Super Hornets were called upon to strike ISIS positions near Fallujah as Iraqi forces prepared to launch an offensive to retake the city. ISIS checkpoints, armored vehicles and training camps near Fallujah were targeted, preventing ISIS from consolidating its defenses and preparing for further offensives. A key objective of these dynamic engagement missions was the disruption of ISIS supply lines. In western and northern Iraq, RAAF Hornets regularly targeted ISIS fuel trucks, ammunition depots, and supply convoys, cutting off crucial resources for ISIS fighters on the front lines. These missions were vital in preventing ISIS from resupplying its forces in contested areas like Mosul and Fallujah, weakening their ability to resist coalition-backed ground offensives. By adopting target of opportunity strikes, the RAAF was able to neutralize ISIS positions as they appeared, whether they were in the form of moving convoys, reinforcing troops, or fortified positions. By September 13, 2015, the Australian Air Task Group had completed 408 airstrike missions over Iraq, with Fa-18F Super Hornets conducting 209 missions and releasing 278 weapons, and Fa-18A Hornets completing 199 missions with 237 weapons deployed. However, on September 16, 2015, the Royal Australian Air Force conducted its first Operation Okra airstrike in Syria, targeting an ISIS weapons cache to diminish ISIS's ability to conduct operations in both Syria and Iraq. Australia's entry into Syria was justified on the grounds of collective self-defence. The Australian government argued that ISIS posed a direct threat to regional and international stability, including Australian interests. The mission began with the RAAF's Wedgetail gathering intelligence and providing surveillance over the area, while a KC-30A multi-role tanker was on hand for any refueling of the strike aircraft. 2 Australian Hornets were dispatched for the mission, likely taking off from the Al Minhad Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. After identifying an armoured personnel carrier concealed within a compound, the pilots relayed the information back to the Combined Air Operations Centre, which is responsible for coordinating coalition airstrikes. Upon receiving authorization to proceed, one of the Hornets deployed a precision-guided munition, successfully destroying the target. This was likely a GBU-31 or GBU-38 JDAMs. These are GPS-guided bombs used for their accuracy and ability to strike specific targets with minimal collateral damage. The exact location was not publicly disclosed, but was described as near areas of ISIS activity, likely within the vicinity of the self-declared ISIS capital, Raqqa. While no exact time of day was revealed, coalition airstrikes in Syria typically took place during night or early morning hours. This timing allows for greater safety and tactical advantage, as night operations reduce the risk of enemy anti-aircraft fire and enhance the element of surprise. The use of night vision equipment and advanced radar systems in fighter jets like the FA-18A Hornet ensures that pilots can carry out missions effectively, even in low visibility conditions. This airstrike was symbolically important as it marked Australia's deeper involvement in the Syrian conflict. It also demonstrated the operational capabilities of the Australian military in conducting precision airstrikes in a complex and heavily monitored airspace shared by multiple countries and factions. It was one of many airstrikes that would follow as Australia continued to engage in air operations against ISIS targets in Syria, contributing to the coalition's efforts to reclaim territory from the terrorist group and weaken its hold over the region. Ramadi, the capital of Anbar province in western Iraq, fell to ISIS in May 2015, dealing a significant blow to the Iraqi government and coalition forces. The city had strategic importance due to its proximity to Baghdad and major transportation routes. The Iraqi Security Forces, supported by the US-led coalition, launched a counter-offensive in November 2015 to retake the city. The RAAF provided initial airstrikes to weaken ISIS's defensive capabilities. These early strikes focused on destroying ISIS fortifications and clearing the way for Iraqi ground forces to enter the city. The counter-offensive involved intense urban warfare as ISIS had heavily fortified the city, planting booby traps, building defensive positions, and using civilian infrastructure as shields. The Iraqi forces encountered heavy resistance, especially in the central parts of Ramadi, where ISIS had built complex defensive networks. Precision air support was critical to overcoming these obstacles. In December 2015, Australian FA-18s provided that close air support for Iraqi ground forces, particularly the 1st Iraqi Special Operations Force Brigade, during the liberation of the city. Targets included ISIS defensive positions, car bombs, factories, weapon caches, sniper nests, bridges, tunnels, supply lines, and command centers. The RAAF used GBU 31 and 38 JDAMs and paveway laser-guided bombs for precise targeting in the urban environment of Ramadi, where ISIS had heavily fortified buildings and used civilians as human shields. The complex urban terrain of the city, with its narrow streets and dense building layout, posed challenges, but Australian pilots, with their advanced targeting systems and the real-time intelligence from the Wedgetail and other surveillance aircraft, were able to strike with precision and effectiveness. Supporting the Super Hornets were the KC-30A, multi-role tanker, to extend air missions over Ramadi, and the Wedgetail for command and control, coordinating airspace and directing airstrikes to support the coalition's overall strategy during the battle. The Battle of Ramadi was a significant campaign in Iraq's Anbar province, where Iraqi forces, with coalition air support, recaptured the city from the control of ISIS. The RAAF's contribution was vital in providing precision airstrikes and support to the Iraqi security forces throughout the operation. Operation Tidal Wave 2, a coalition campaign that began in late 2015 and continued through 2016, aimed to systematically destroy ISIS's oil production and transportation infrastructure. By September 2016, this operation had targeted key oil fields, refineries, storage facilities, and transportation routes in ISIS-controlled areas in Syria and Iraq. The RAAF was a key contributor to these efforts to strike ISIS-controlled oil fields in eastern Syria and northern Iraq, where significant oil revenue was being made on the black market. Fields in the Deir ez-Zor region of Syria and in areas around Mosul in Iraq were prime targets. For these strikes, the RAAF deployed its Hornets and Super Hornets, supported by the KC-30A and the Wedgetail. Once again, the fighters were armed with GBU 31 and GBU 38 JDAMs to neutralize oil wells, refining equipment, tanker trucks, and oil storage depots in the Deir ez-Zor region of eastern Syria. By September 2016, the coalition's airstrikes on oil infrastructure had significantly reduced ISIS's oil production capacity. It is estimated that these efforts led to a 50% decrease in ISIS's oil revenue, severely impacting its ability to fund military operations and governance. Mosul was Iraq's second-largest city and a major ISIS stronghold, having been captured by the terrorist group in June 2014. It became a central hub for ISIS operations, making it a strategic priority for the Iraqi government and coalition forces. Led by the Iraqi Security Forces, the battle for Mosul was supported by the international coalition. Throughout the prolonged battle, RAAF aircraft played a pivotal role in providing air support for Iraqi forces on the ground. FA-18s conducted numerous sorties, targeting ISIS positions, supply lines, and key infrastructure within the city. These strikes were part of a broader coalition effort to liberate Mosul and finally destroy ISIS in its last major strongholds in Iraq. The coalition began the offensive on Mosul in mid-October 2016, with the RAAF providing airstrikes on ISIS defensive lines and key infrastructure. During this phase, ISIS fighters had entrenched themselves in eastern Mosul, preparing for the Iraqi assault. The Australian airstrikes were vital in targeting places building suicide vehicle bombs that could wreak havoc on advancing ground forces. After months of intense fighting, Iraqi forces, supported by coalition airstrikes, liberated East Mosul in January 2017. During this phase, the RAAF assisted in eliminating ISIS command centers and heavy weaponry. They also helped destroy ISIS's defensive positions and supply lines that had been preventing the Iraqi forces from making faster progress. By February through to July 2017, the fight for West Mosul was even more intense due to the densely packed urban landscape. Australian airstrikes became even more targeted, focusing on ISIS fortifications, tunnels, and weapons storage sites located in civilian areas. They also provided support for special forces operations in West Mosul, where ISIS had heavily mined and fortified the area, using civilians as human shields. Precision bombing by Australian FA-18s were instrumental in dismantling ISIS's ability to defend their stronghold. By July 2017, the battle had reached its final stages, with Iraqi forces retaking the old city of Mosul. The RAAF continued to provide air support during these critical final assaults on ISIS's last positions in the city. As Iraqi forces pushed deeper into the city's narrow streets and alleys, coalition air support was instrumental in eliminating remaining ISIS pockets of resistance, particularly in the Al-Nuri Mosque area, where ISIS made its last stand. Just as with the liberation of Ramadi, urban warfare posed significant challenges in Mosul, as ISIS embedded itself in civilian infrastructure. No doubt the RAAF's precision airstrikes with JDAMs minimized civilian casualties and allowed coalition and Iraqi forces to make significant advances against heavily fortified ISIS positions. The liberation of Mosul in July 2017 marked a decisive defeat for ISIS, leading to the collapse of its territorial control in Iraq. The RAAF's contribution to the battle for Mosul was part of a broader coalition effort that then continued to eliminate the remnants of ISIS fighters and assist Iraqi forces to secure and stabilize liberated areas. In addition to combat missions, the RAAF played a role in humanitarian efforts, such as the August 2014 mission to drop supplies to Yazidi civilians trapped on Mount Sinjar. Australian C-130J aircraft were part of a 16-aircraft coalition mission that provided critical food and water to the stranded civilians. Later, RAAF transport planes airlifted arms and munitions to Kurdish forces battling ISIS. In August 2014, ISIS forces captured large parts of northern Iraq, including the town of Sinjar, displacing thousands of people, primarily the Yazidi ethnic and religious minority. The Yazidis, considered heretics by ISIS, were systematically targeted by the group. This led to mass killings, abductions, and the enslavement of Yazidi women. Around 50,000 Yazidis fled to the Sinjar Mountains, a barren, mountainous region where they were trapped without food, water, or shelter, surrounded by ISIS fighters. The situation rapidly turned into a humanitarian crisis as people faced starvation, dehydration, and the threat of execution if captured. The international community, led by the United States and its allies, quickly responded with humanitarian airdrops and airstrikes to provide immediate aid and stop ISIS's advance. On the night of August 13, 2014, a RAAF C-130J Hercules conducted its first humanitarian airdrop over Mount Sinjar. The RAAF was tasked with delivering 15 tons of emergency aid to the stranded Yazidis, including water, food, and medical supplies. This was in conjunction with other coalition forces, also delivering supplies to those trapped on the mountain. The mission required precise navigation, as the airdrops had to be conducted at night and within a dangerous airspace, with ISIS forces potentially threatening the operation. The RAAF worked closely with the US Central Command and other coalition partners to coordinate the airdrops and ensure that supplies were delivered to areas where they were most needed. The Mount Sinjar airdrops were just one example of the RAAF's humanitarian efforts under Operation Okra. Over the course of the operation, the Australians participated in various humanitarian missions aimed at aiding civilians affected by the conflict in Iraq and Syria. RAAF C-17A, Globemaster III and C-130J Hercules were used to deliver aid to coalition partners in Iraq and Kurdish forces fighting ISIS, ensuring that relief efforts reached vulnerable populations across northern Iraq. The RAAF also supported the evacuation of vulnerable populations from conflict zones, particularly during major military offensives. In coordination with international NGOs and UN agencies, the Australian Air Force provided logistical support in the transport of refugees and IDPs to safer regions. There was also critical logistical and transport support to aid organisations and medical personnel working in the region. This included airlifting personnel and equipment into remote or conflict-affected areas, ensuring that humanitarian aid workers had the resources needed to carry out their missions. The Royal Australian Air Force made significant contributions to Operation Okra from 2014 to 2017, targeting ISIS forces with precision airstrikes, providing support to ground operations, and engaging in humanitarian efforts. Through advanced coordination and the use of cutting-edge military technology, the RAAF supported critical missions in both Iraq and Syria, including aiding the liberation of key cities like Ramadi and Mosul. These efforts demonstrated Australia's commitment to the international coalition against terrorism and its ability to effectively engage in complex and dynamic military operations. The Australian Defence Forces Operation Okra in Iraq and Syria concluded in December 2024.